Hey everybody, Rosematter here. Welcome to part 3 of my Chaos Head Noah Let's Play. Last episode was actually pretty tame. After the first episode, it was introduction to a couple of new characters. Obviously, our protag is dealing with the after effects of seeing a murder. If he did see one, I feel like this is going to be kind of one of those mind fuck stories where it's just like, did this thing happen? Did it not happen? Especially with the whole thing with delusions. But yes, we were introduced to his little sister and to a girl. I am so sorry, I can't remember what her name is. She's actually very sweet, a third year in his school who's been kind of stalking him because she's interested in him. I don't know what she sees in him, frankly. He's kind of a repellent person. But turns out she's a big nerd too. She loves the same anime that he loves, and she wants to like hang out with him and get to know him better. And he's just kind of like jumping between like, oh my gosh, am I going to be a normie? Like I've got this cute girl who's interested in me, and also like calling her like horrible things to his online friend and saying like no 3D woman is as good as Sarah. But yeah, he's really awkward around her. And then we were introduced to a nameless girl at the very end who seems to be moving to Tokyo. She's going to be, I assume going to the same school, so we're going to get to know her as well. But yeah, we're going to jump in and continue the story and see what happens next. Another week came, and with it, another school day. As usual, I headed to school with my head hung low, depressed as ever. Autumn was starting to come into full swing. The leaves of the trees in Shoto Park were slowly changing color, and I was starting to feel chilly in my short-sleeve uniform. I supposed it made sense that I'd be surprised by the change of season, given I rarely went outside in the first place. I still hadn't really registered that summer had ended. My weekend had consisted of non-stop ESO. Grim had kept on bugging me about Yua. Okay, Yua was her name. But I just ignored him. I hadn't gotten an email from Yua since the first one. I hadn't replied to her first one either, so maybe she'd finally given up on me. I really hoped that was the case. Whenever I talked to Yua, my feelings always got all jumbled up. Those interactions almost made me have a little hope. But there was no point in being so optimistic. At the end of the day, I was just an otaku freak. My whole life, I'd never ever had any success with 3D, so I'd just given up on it. Please don't give me any hope. Please don't have any hope for me. Just as I thought that, someone tapped my shoulder from behind. I figured it was Nanami or Misumi-kun, but when I turned around, I was shocked. Yua was looking at me with a smile on her face. Her cheeks were a little flushed. Why was she so out of breath? Had she really not given up yet? Did she still have some hope left in me? I found myself nodding out of reflex. Oh, Yua, poor sweet Yua. I feel like there's something wrong with this girl. Like, maybe she doesn't know just how depraved my character is, but I'm like, why is she so intent on, like, getting to know this random second-year student? Seriously, what the hell did Yua want from me? That's what I want to know. Did she expect me to like her back? Did she want me to be her boyfriend? And then did she want us to live out some intimate, lovey-dovey fantasy together? With these kinds of visual novels, where I know it's kind of like psychological horror, my instinct, whenever there's like a character who seems a little bit too good to be true, a little bit too sweet, I'm like, okay, do they have some sort of ulterior motive? Is there something about them that's going to be revealed later? She could just be a really sweet character. But I guess I'm kind of like my guy. It's just like I'm kind of a little bit on edge. Just be like, what's your intention? There was no way I could do that. No way I could be that normal no matter how hard I tried. I really wanted to, but it just wasn't possible. I still didn't understand why Yua even liked me in the first place, which made it all the more impossible to trust her. So I just couldn't do it.
西条くん、どうしたんですか？
え？
ずっと立ち止まってるので。
Upon realizing that, I quickly started to walk away, leaving Yua behind. But before I could get very far, Yua had already caught up with me.
昨日、西条くんのクラスに行ったんですけど、いませんでしたよね。もしかして風邪でもひいて休んでるんじゃないかと思って心配だったんです。でも元気そうでよかった。
たまにしか。
はい？
僕、たまにしか学校来ない。みんなから引きこもりって思われてる。
Did that break the spell? You're totally disillusioned now that you know the truth, right? If so, I didn't mind. I'd never got my hopes up anyway. Go ahead and call me an otaku freak, and then after that, never talk to me again.
そうですか。でも今日は会えてよかったです。
I was left speechless. All I could manage to do was stare at Yua's smile, but when our eyes met, I got flustered and looked down. How was she not disgusted by me?
っていうか、たまにでも学校に来てるなら、西条くんは引きこもりじゃないと思います。すいません。分かったようなこと言っちゃって。
でも、苦痛だよ。
だとしたら、偉いです。
え？
I never thought I'd ever hear someone say that to me. What the hell was respectable about a total loser like me? A gentle smile had spread over Yua's face. A smile so sweet it could cure any disease. That was genuinely what I thought in that moment.
だって、西条くんは辛いのに頑張って学校に来ていますから。苦痛なら、普通は来られないですよ。
でも、僕はオタだし、キモいし。
私、西条くんの話を聞くの好きですよ。
What the hell? What was with all this validation? Why did hearing it make me feel so good about myself? It felt like Yua was embracing me all the way down to my core. Like she was giving me the right to be here, to exist in this moment. It felt like when I was with her, maybe I could even be a normal person again. When he talks like this, it does make me feel sympathy for him. It's a thing where it's just like he's felt rejected by people so long that he basically shuts them out and he rejects them first. He doesn't even give them the chance to get close to him because he fears that they will judge him and hate him. So for someone to just the act of just being genuinely nice to him is enough to just make him feel like, oh my gosh, maybe I have some worth. Maybe my life is not terrible. But I am afraid that just by the simple act of her being nice, I'm afraid that he might become like obsessed, be like, she's clearly in love with me. It's like because I got a little bit of positive attention from a girl. I hadn't realized until now, but almost all the students were already gone. Everyone had made their way into the school building.
西条くん、それじゃあ私、失礼します。あ、今日の放課後、時間ありますか？
え？
もし、よかったら、その、一緒に帰りましょう。
With a timid tone, Yua mumbled her words, a faint blush on her cheeks.
放課後、中庭で待ってます。もし気が向いたら、来てください。
This really does feel like she is. Like, I know we're playing a visual novel, but it's just like the meta thing of like him saying that these 3D women, they can't compare to 2D, but I know I'm playing a game with 2D girls. And she's like a quote-unquote 3D girl, but she's kind of acting like that kind of shy, sweet, older sister type. What if the revelation of this was like, this was all in his head and like this is some sort of simulation and he like is actually playing a visual novel of himself? That's probably not where it's going, but that would be funny.
無理に来なくても全然平気ですから。失礼します。
Yua bowed elegantly, then darted off toward the third-year classrooms. I watched her disappear into the building, then I pinched my cheek. It really wasn't a dream or a delusion. I couldn't focus on my classes all day after that. Or rather, I didn't bother trying to focus. I just rested my head on my hand, staring sluggishly into the autumn sky outside the window. My teachers, my classmates, none of them ever paid any attention to me. But Yua did. Yua was different from the other shitbags at this school. I couldn't stop thinking about her. I couldn't stop having delusions about her, and before I knew it, classes were over for the day. Hey, there's, what's his name, Matsumi? He gives him attention. I wonder what his thing is, too. Like, he's this popular guy who pays attention to him, so maybe he just has, like, really low opinions about himself, and maybe he's just imagining people thinking that he's, like, an otaku freak, and he just has really bad self-esteem issues, and he assumes that people are assuming the worst about him?
Yo, Taku. 今日もデートか？この前のメガネのことはうまくいってるんだろうな。おいおい、ニートだからって躊躇してんなよ。向こうがお前のこと気に入ってくれてんなら、付き合うか付き合わないかはともかく、やっちまうのが礼儀。
そんなことしないよ。
おい、なんだよいきなり大声出して。
ユアとはそんなことしない。
あ？お前まだ言ってんの？なんで最初から諦めるんだよ。そろそろ引きこもりから卒業しようぜ。
Okay, well, he calls him a shut-in, but... And that wasn't even what this was about. But there was no point in trying to explain that to Misumi-kun, a guy who only thought with the wrong head. So ignoring how puzzled Misumi-kun was, I quickly made my way out of the classroom. The shortest path from here to the courtyard is through the skyway to the third-year building and down the stairs, I think. I didn't come to school often enough to have a good grasp on the layout. I didn't even know where half the club rooms were. So I was a little bit anxious as I walked down the hallway to the next building. Oh, she looks quite, stern. As I walked, I noticed a girl standing alone in the middle of the hall, staring up at the sky. Her face looked stiff, so despite her looking out the window, it wasn't in the wistful kind of way. She was obviously in everyone's way, but she didn't seem to care in the slightest. I know you can hear me walking toward you. Move along, will you? I'm in a bit of a hurry here. I was getting real DQN vibes from her, and I didn't want anything to do with it. Okay. Obviously, that is a tip we've had before. Is it? Oh, DQN. Okay. Dokyen. Stupid, antisocial, or delinquents. So I tried to keep my distance and slip by Girl B without getting noticed. Oh shit, was she talking to me? Fuck. Was she going to threaten me and take all my money? Or take me to the DQN hangout spot and have me lynched just because she didn't like my face? Or worse? Give me a fucking break. What had I ever done to deserve this? I looked toward Girl B. She was staring at me. Did she just ask me that? I'm Nishijo Takumi, but this is the first time I've ever spoken to her, so obviously she wouldn't know that. So I was right. Whatever she wants from me, it can't be good. I quickly bowed to avoid looking Girl B in the face and ran away as fast as I could. After bolting through the hall, down the stairs, and out the door, I shot a look behind me at the third-year building. It seemed like the scary girl hadn't come after me. I was safe. To be completely honest, I was getting tired of all this bullshit. Wherever I went in the third dimension, I was always running into another goddamn trap. I took a second to catch my breath and then looked for the courtyard. The courtyard was between the school building and the pool. It was so narrow it was more like a path than an actual garden. There were a few evenly spaced flower beds spread across the courtyard. The violet-covered flowers were especially eye-catching. What kind of flowers are those, I wondered, but I really didn't have a clue. And standing in front of the flower beds was none other than Yua. She stood still, gazing at the flowers listlessly. Just like she'd promised, she'd really waited for me here. She'd waited for me, and me alone. Yua hadn't betrayed me. Maybe I could trust her. Maybe she really was the savior I'd been looking for. Yua looked up and noticed me standing there. And a moment later, her eyes widened. I got shy and looked away, frozen in place. Should I walk toward her? I didn't know. Why was she so surprised? Maybe I shouldn't have come. But as I was lost in thought, Yua ran over to me.
びっくりしました。
え、
西条くんが本当に来てくれるなんて。どうせ来てもらえないって諦めかけてたんです。でも待っててよかった。
I was taken aback. Yua was thinking the same way as me. We both had the same pessimistic mindset. But there was one clear place that we differed. Whenever I had negative thoughts, I'd freeze up and do nothing. But whenever Yua had negative thoughts, she'd take action anyway. I seriously respected her initiative. I wanted to be like that too.
一緒に帰ってくれますか?
She timidly asked me, and I nodded in response. Walking side by side, the two of us passed through the school gates. It was a little embarrassing. It felt like other students were staring daggers at me, green with envy. And the more aware of that I became, the more anxious I got. I guess I was right. I really can't walk home alone with a girl. We crossed paths with a teacher I'd never seen before, or at least I assumed he was a teacher since he was wearing a suit instead of a school uniform. But wasn't he I was thinking the same thing. I'm like, that's a teacher? Wasn't he a little young to be a teacher? Well, I hardly ever came to school, so it only made sense. I wouldn't know what half the teachers looked like. Hell, sometimes I even forgot what my homeroom teacher looked like. The teacher in the suit was looking around restlessly as he headed for the school building.
どうしました?
Not knowing how to react, I quickly shook my head, returned to Yua's side, and went back to walking with her. We'd said we'd walk home together, but my base was only 10 minutes from school. Meanwhile, Yua needed to go all the way to Shinsen Station, so I needed to accompany her before I could go home. But by force of habit, I led Yua into Shoto Park. The park was something of a shortcut on my route to school, saving me about a minute each way.
西条くんって朝よくこの公園でパンを食べてませんか?
How did she know that?
やっぱりよく見かけたんです。でもいる時といない時があって。
Girl, what is your obsession with me?
今日ようやくその謎が解けました。学校にたまにしか来ないからだったんですね。あ、別にそれがダメって言ってるわけじゃなくてですね。素朴な疑問だったので。
I wonder if, like, intentionally she's supposed to give off the vibes like something's not right here. Like, why is she so obsessed with some random student that she's never talked to before? That she would just be, like, watching me wherever I go. Yua suddenly stopped, turning toward the bench I always ate breakfast on. Nobody was sitting there at the moment.
なんだかここに座っているあなたの背中はすごく辛そうに見えて。
Maybe she's the eyes of God where he's like, it feels like someone's watching me. It was just her the whole time. Yua bent forward slightly, gently stroking the back of the bench.
何度も見かけるうちにだんだん気になってきて。
The bench was right in front of the fence by the pond. Whenever you sat on it, you could just stare out to the pond without needing to worry about whether others might be looking at you. It was right by the watermill, too, making it even more inconspicuous. That was another huge plus.
ここ最近は姿を見かけなかった日は心配でご飯も喉を通らなかったりしてたんです。
Really? I never noticed her looking at me when I was here.
バカみたいですよね。一度も話したこともない人の心配してるなんて。でも話しかける勇気もなかったので。
So her initial stalking was an extension of that. Or maybe not stalking per se. Maybe she'd just been looking out for me.
ちょっと座ってみてもいいですか? 西条くんがどんな景色を見ていたのか私も知りたいから。
I didn't really have much of a reason to refuse. I nodded my head, still facing out toward the lake. Yua placed her bag on top of the bench and quietly took a seat. She then straightened her posture and gazed out at the lake. It was so incredibly quiet, so incredibly serene, and Yua was sitting right by my side. A gentle breeze drew ripples on the water, and it softly swayed Yua's hair. Was this what it felt like to be a normie? The situation was so ordinary, so casual. So why did it feel like I was about to cry?
ここで朝食をとるのって気持ちよさそうですよね。
I looked at the side of Yua's face as she whispered that. If life were an eroge, this is where she'd confess her love. Then we'd lean in, kiss, and the good end credits would roll. And who knows? If the situation called for it, maybe we'd get straight into some exhibitionism. JK.
私も今度やってみようかな。
Yua turned and looked up at me. Unable to find the words to say, I looked down at Yua's bag. Cursing my inability to maintain eye contact with the girl, I stared instead at the 3 Garo froggy straps hanging from her bag. Oh, alright, we got an illusion here. Or delusion. Hold on. Wait a minute. Something about this scene was really nagging at me. Is he just realizing about the fact that, oh, no, we don't want to close. Oh my gosh, how do I save again? The fact that this was the bag that was... I mean, we knew that she was the one that was following him at the cafe, right? Is this the first time he's realized that? Alright, let's go with a... What kind of delusion do we want? I'm just checking to see if there's... I guess it doesn't really matter. I'm curious what the bad delusion is, and that thing was... the Garo Froggies, characters that were popular with high school girls. But I'd seen those exact ones before, hadn't I? Where though? Okay, so I guess this is his first time realizing that. Is he gonna picture her, like, just stabbing him or something, killing him here? Where no one will find him? It was in room 36. Whenever I went to At Cafe, I always used room 37. Meanwhile, room 36, the room next door, was always empty. But last week, the day I'd first met Yua, I'd been shocked to find someone was actually using it. Oh, that's right, they were looking at sites dedicated to NewGen, no less. Then I'd come across Yua inside At Cafe, started panicking, then instantly made a run for it. No way, you can't be serious. Was it really her, back then, in that room? I looked at Yua, who was still sitting on the bench. Her eyes stared at me from behind her glasses, and her gaze collided with mine. It was the first time we'd properly made eye contact since we'd met. There was still a smile on her face for a brief moment, but it quickly changed into a puzzled look. What sort of expression was I making? I couldn't tell. I turned my gaze toward her bag, toward the toy straps attached to it once again. I felt the air change as she gasped in response.
君
A golden leaf fell off a branch, swaying in the wind, and ever so gently, ever so gracefully danced through the air. All sorts of thoughts flashed through my mind. I didn't really understand why, but Garo Froggies were popular, so having a few of them dangling from your bag wasn't anything unusual. But on that day, Yua had probably been there in room 36, and all this time she'd never mentioned it even once. And to make matters worse, she'd been researching NewGen. I'd almost completely forgotten about those incidents already, but I'd been a witness to one of them. That gruesome spectacle revived itself again in my mind, and then... I saw a flash of the culprit's face.
これですか？ゲロカエルンって言うんです。何人かの友達にもらっちゃって、気がついたら密になってまして。
Yua's smile had gotten slightly stiffer. She reached out for her bag, trying to take the Garo Froggy straps off of it.
最近女子高生に大人気なんですよ。私はあんまり可愛いとは思わないんですけど。
Yua's hands were trembling. She frantically tried to pull them off of her bag, but they just wouldn't budge.
変だな。どうして外れないんでしょう。ちょっと待ってくださいね。西条くんにも見せてあげ。
Oh, what's all this? Looks like maybe all the stuff about NewGen stuff. Yua pulled on the straps a bit too hard, causing the bag to fall off the bench. The bag was unzipped, so all of her notebooks and textbooks spilled out onto the ground.
私ったら何をやってるんでしょう。
Just a few minutes ago, I might have even thought of Yua's ditziness as moe, but at this present moment I was just frozen in place. And that was because One of the fallen notebooks had flipped open. Tons of notes and newspaper snippets were scattered across the ground. It looked like it was some sort of scrapbook, and all the notes, all the newspaper snippets, everything was focused on a certain string of cases. And its name was written there clear as day. NewGen.
なんて。
My voice came out ragged. Yua, in a panic, started frantically gathering everything up and shoving it back into her bag. When she did, she held the bag close to her chest and stood up. She looked toward me and nodded, her expression intensely uncomfortable. Her smile from before was nowhere to be found.
それは。
Yua didn't answer. Why wouldn't she talk to me? Please just say something. Anything. Even still, she said nothing, which meant she must have realized that she'd been caught red-handed. I'd wanted to trust her so badly, and I'd just been starting to think that maybe Yua was actually on my side, that she could have been an ally. Oh boy. So I know that the delusions will make more of a what's the word I'm thinking of? Like, have an effect more, because with the first playthrough you do, you're locked into the ending. It doesn't really matter what you choose. But I'm wondering if, depending on if I choose more positive or negative ones, if he's going to be more distrustful of people or more trusting. Like right now, he's not trusting you at all. So I wonder if that's going to carry over now, and that's going to affect my relationship with her. In the end, Sarah was right. 3D girls were the worst pieces of shit imaginable, every last one of them. Yua never liked me at all. She only wanted to get close because she had ulterior motives. Maybe she wanted to turn me into the police. Or maybe she wanted to blackmail me. God damn it. God fucking damn it. I'd almost forgotten all about that incident, yet here we go again. The police had never questioned me, so I thought maybe, just maybe, I could go on pretending it had nothing to do with me. All I wanted was to get away from those stupid murders. So why? What the hell was Yua really after here? No, I didn't even care anymore. I just wanted to run as far away as I could, so I went to turn around. But Yua quickly grabbed my wrist. Oh, her voice sent chills down my spine. Her tone was so cold it felt like my body might freeze over. It didn't even feel like she was the same person. It wasn't the Yua I thought I knew. And her grip. Her grip was way tighter than I'd expected. It wasn't normal. Jolts of pain ran through my arm. My bones felt like they were being crushed. I tried to shake her off me, but she wouldn't let go. In fact, she was pulling me toward her, practically pinning my arm behind my back. From behind me, right by my ear, I heard a whisper that crushed any emotion I had left. With a shiver, I slowly turned around. Oh. That's like the face when I was playing Higurashi, when people were, like, I thought they had, like, they were possessed or whatever, just, oh, creepy, creepy, creepy. She was staring at me. There was no longer any color left in those eyes of hers. I'm hiding things? Only a single thing crossed my mind. Somehow she knew that I had witnessed that staking murder. She knew that I had seen the perpetrator. And that was most likely why she tried to get close to me. I knew she was good. Too good. She'd had me wrapped around her little finger. Everything she told me was a lie. Her taking an interest in me from just one glance. Her liking Bloodtune. Her arranging to go with me to pick up the Sarah post-awakening version figure from the store when it went on sale. All her nice little comments as she'd listened to what I'd had to say. Her wanting to get to know me better. Her being worried about me when I didn't come to school. Her saying that she respected me. Everything that came from her mouth had been a lie. That thought killed me inside. I was overwrought with grief. I tightly clenched my fists. Fuck, fuck, fuck. Why had I believed a single fucking thing she'd said?
本当はもっと時間をかけて調べたかったんだけど、バレちゃったからしょうがないよね。あなたに聞いてもらいたい話があるの。聞いてくれるよね。聞かないなんて言わないよね。あなたは聞くべきよ。聞いて。聞くでしょ。聞かないなら。
What will happen if I don't listen? Yua was almost a completely different person now. The gentle and carefree atmosphere from before was completely gone now. She felt completely unapproachable now. The atmosphere felt bizarre, like one molded from utter obsession. Her tone was as composed as could be, though perhaps cold as ice was a better description. Her usual femininity was completely gone. No, I didn't want to listen. I tried to cover my ears, but I couldn't. Yua was holding on to one of my arms. Her grip was weaker than a second ago, but she still didn't let go. I couldn't move my hand. And while we were in that deadlock, she took a dark, gray, shiny object from her bag and held it out to me. I was petrified. My heart skipped a beat. Any composure I had left was gone. I was so shocked that the hand that was going to cover my ear just fell to my side. Before long, Yua's voice, now sounding almost regretful, reached my ears. Of course, I'd definitely seen it before. I wasn't sure what it was at first, but I quickly realized. It might have looked like a cross, but it was, in fact, a stake. And stakes with such a unique shape were not something you'd see every day. Or at the very least, I had only come across them once. That night, scattered across that alleyway. That night, as the demon girl nailed them into the wall. That night, as a corpse was being nailed onto the wall.
やっぱり知ってるのね。知ってるんでしょ。知ってるに決まってる。知らないなんて言わせない。知ってなくちゃおかしい。知ってるよね。知ってるよね。
I'm just waiting for her to throw a liar at me. I frantically shook my head in denial. A disgusting cold sweat broke out on my brow. All I could do was wipe it away as I kept shaking my head as hard as I could.
これ、あなたの部屋にあったのよ。あなたの部屋、ベッドの下。
So creepy, the way that she repeats things like, listen to me, you'll listen to me, you know something, you know something.
落ちてたの。落としたよね。それとも捨てた。とにかく落ちてた。
This is so creepy.
落ちてたの。
I know this is a delusion, but it's still really creepy. Who the hell was this girl? When the fuck had she searched my room? Was it the day we'd first met? When my leg got injured and she'd come all the way into my room with me? When she'd seen my Sarah figures and her face lit up all cute like a fucking Christmas tree?
この杭、外国製のすごく珍しい杭なのよ。それと、ニュージェネ第3の事件で使われた杭と同じ。同じなの。同じよね。同じなのは間違いない。
And she's repeating again, the same, the same.
同じよ。遺体を壁に貼り付けにした杭と。
It's just the repetition, the short sentences. It's just, oh, it's so, like, what's the word I'm thinking of? It's unnatural. It's creepy.
同じ。
This is giving me Higurashi vibes a little bit. I was convinced. This woman thought I was the culprit behind NewGen. She thought I was some kind of insane cutthroat murderer. Did she think she was a detective or something? What did she call herself? Kusunoki Yua, ace high school detective or some shit? Fucking kill yourself, actually. That shit might have worked in anime or video games. But this was real life, and little did she know her reasoning had a fatal flaw. I knew who the real killer was. I'd seen her with my own 2 eyes. I had seen that demon myself. Sure, I didn't know her name, but she'd been wearing the Sume uniform, which meant she was someone I could know.
だから
Yua suddenly hung her head and let out a small sigh. She loosened her grip on my wrist even more, then finally let go.
それ以上でもそれ以下でもないです。ただ、あなたが知ってるかどうかを確かめたかっただけ。本当は、まだ言うつもりじゃなかったですし。
What the fuck had she meant by yet?
それじゃあ、もう一つ確認させてください。
This is a really long delusion, actually. Usually they're pretty quick.
予知能力がありますか？
Precognitive powers. Precognition, to know what is going to happen in advance, to foresee an unusual phenomenon, also known as foresight or foreknowledge, to know what is going to happen in the future before it actually happens. The term does not refer to predictions based on experience, information, or statistics, but rather a special sense that transcends humanity's natural perception. It has not been scientifically proven to exist. The way it manifests differs from person to person, with the most common being visions and prophetic dreams. Belief in precognition has existed since ancient times, where shrine maidens were often heralded as carriers. Psychics and fortune tellers are the modern incarnation of this belief, but there are many false actors who enjoy taking advantage of the superstition, claiming they have precognitive powers in order to swindle others. So, making another connection, I know, between Steins Gate and this, but they said like precognition is like the knowledge something's going to happen without previous knowledge or experience. Where Steins Gate, the reason that Okabe knew about things were going to happen was because he'd experienced them already. This is just the idea of like knowing something for no obvious reason.
Huh?
I couldn't help but just stand there with my mouth open. Precognitive powers? What the fuck? What did that have to do with the incidents? I tilted my head to the side, utterly perplexed. As I did, Yua's hand retreated into her bag once more before taking out a picture printed in full color.
予知能力があるって思わなきゃ納得できないような画像データをあなたが持っていたから。
The picture was that grotesque one Shogun had sent me. Why did Yua have it?
これ、
あなたはどうしてニュージェネ第3の事件の再現画像を持っているんですか？しかもこの画像が流出したのは事件の前日です。あなたの使った PC にキャッシュが残ってました。
違う。
I'd gotten that image earlier that day when I chatted with Shogun. I hadn't made it myself. I downloaded it, so it must have still been in my history. That's it, I'll just show Yua that. Still, though, how had Yua even gotten this image in the first place? She'd said that it had been in my computer's cache, but how would she have known that? When Yua had come into my room, she definitely hadn't had the time to snoop around my PC.
まさか君が将軍か。
Was she trying to frame me? It was all a setup by Yua. She was the NewGen killer, and now she was going to use me as a scapegoat in order to throw off the police, wasn't she?
助けて。
It was all too much. Why did it have to be me of all people? Was it because I was a freak? Was it because I had no friends? Yua didn't say a word. She just shook her head lightly.
その画像はアットカフェルーム37の PC から拾ったんです。あなたの PC もできれば調べたかったんですけど、その機会はさすがにありませんでした。
Room 37. That was the one that I'd always used. This bitch really did her research. Yua looked at me with a slightly apologetic look. It almost felt like she had turned back into the Yua I knew, if only for a moment. And while that happened, she started fishing around in her bag once more. But this time, she took out a page with text on it and held it out to me. I had a bad feeling about this. Alarm bells were going off in my head, telling me not to look. But there was no way I could just ignore it, because if I did, then I would surely end up being framed.
それがあなたのすべてです。
What? What the hell was that supposed to mean? Did she mean she had all my personal information too? Was Yua some sort of hacker? I reached out and grabbed the printout all while my heart was pounding out of my chest. But to my surprise, the page didn't have my personal information. It was just a chat log.
Huh.
The two members of the chat log were Ninehard and Shogun. Yeah, there's also the fact that Shogun said, "Whose eyes are those eyes?" Like, that itself is weird.
え、
What was so strange about it? It looked like a perfectly normal chat log to me. I definitely remembered having this conversation with Shogun.
ナイトハルトと将軍の発言時間が全然噛み合ってないんです。
They don't match. Let's see.
あ、
Huh? What the hell? How is this
そ
possible?
こにあるナイトハルトは西条くん。発言時間は9月28日の午前3時台。そして翌日、あなたはアットカフェに行ってます。西条くんがアットカフェに行くのは学校帰りと決まってる。そして学校に行くのは週に 2.5 回。あなたのクラスメイトから聞いたんですけど、先週あなたが学校に来た日は、月曜日、水曜日、木曜日。先週の月曜日は9月29日。将軍の発言時間と同じ日です。
Hmm. What was she talking about?
ルーム37の PC のチャットログを調べさせてもらいました。そこから分かったことは。
For just a moment, Yua hesitated. Then she stared straight at me before breaking the cold, unfeeling truth to me.
あなた一人の自作自演。
What? Huh? Don't look at me. What?
将軍は
This delusion has been going on so long, I'm almost like believing that this is actually happening right now. Don't look at me.
あなた自身。
Okay, just as I say that, the delusion
何も見たくない
ends.
何も聞きたくない。時間は一定じゃない。記憶には矛盾がある。視界にはエラーがある。地球は回ってない。これはきっとゲームなんだ。
Oh, wait a minute. I stuffed my mouth with some fish sausage as I turned on my PC.
僕じゃない。
Wait a minute, wait a minute, wait a minute. So, that was a delusion, right? That didn't actually happen. I was hoping, because usually when the delusion ends, we're snapped back to like the moment where he has it and everything is normal, but we're just, okay, are we just skipping ahead now? Before long, my monitor shone brightly with my Seroton
僕
wallpaper.
がいるべき世界は
I went straight to ESO and opened it up without an ounce of
ここ
hesitation.
じゃないんだ。
Oh, that makes me kind of tempted to go back and see the positive one of what would happen. Okay, that was chapter 1. Chapter 2, Click Me. What the hell? Vroom vroom, quick, get on in if you're going to the field trip. All aboard. Lying face down on the floor, Nishijo Takumi held a colored pencil in his hand. The one he was currently using was yellow, having switched from a red one only a few minutes ago. He joyously ran his pencil across the spread-out sketchbook, which he was nearly lying on top of. Takumi loved drawing pictures. He would always doodle on the edges of his notes during every lesson at school. The morning news had been left running in the background, but since news and the like were boring to a fourth grader like Takumi, he did not pay it any mind. Vroom vroom, candy, get your candy here, only 300 yen. He was drawing a yellow bus and pretending he was the driver. All ashore that's going ashore, we're heading out, vroom. As he imagined the scene in his head, he made it actually happen in the picture. Times where he would get too excited and accidentally draw on the tatami beneath him were not exactly infrequent. Nanami, who would always read a manga beside him, would scold him each time he did it. She had some nerve considering she was the little sister, usually saying things along the lines of, "Oh, come on, don't get the floor all dirty." Even so, Takumi never became any less immersed in his art. However, when he got to the point of drawing the people in the window, his hand suddenly stopped. Then he ripped up the sketchbook and threw it away. On the previous day, on the day where the autumn field trip had only been one more day away, Takumi had suddenly been told by his parents he couldn't go, even though it had been something he had been looking forward to for a very long time. So much so that he had been in a constant state of excitement for the entire day, wanting the next to arrive as soon as possible. That cruel declaration from his parents was something Takumi absolutely could not accept. This was the moment right here where his life just changed for the worse. He kicked and screamed, saying he would definitely go no matter what, but it was no use. His parents would not listen no matter what he said, choosing only to repeat the same words again and again. You just can't. We're doing this for you, Takumi. Is there going to be a thing like the bus got into an accident and a bunch of people died, like his parents had some sort of precognition about it, and now he has like that ability or something? Like, we're doing this for you. Like, what? Takumi sank into his bed and trembled with so much frustration he was close to ripping his futon to shreds. He resented his parents from the bottom of his heart. For Takumi, that field trip had been a big, big event that could not have come soon enough. Everyone else in his class could go, but he alone was not allowed to. From his perspective, that was just beyond unreasonable. Takumi was in a lonely world. Everyone else was in a super fun world. To him, it felt like he alone had been completely cut off from it. He could not forgive the teacher, his classmates, anyone. They'd all left him behind. This really is starting to sound like this is the moment where he just shut the world out and he's just turned into the person he is today. And he especially could not forgive his parents for their sudden, unfair decision. Those feelings transformed into pure hatred towards his parents. Maybe it is, and toward all of his classmates. Takumi bit his lip hard enough to draw blood. He muttered curses at them over and over. I don't think anyone should be allowed to go. following morning arrived. The phone had been ringing over and over again since dawn. Each time his mother would pick up the phone, she seemed to be very shaken while Oh my gosh, did the bus did the bus crash or something? Did something happen on the field trip? And it's like they just knew something was going to happen, so they kept him at home. Takumi could not get even a wink of sleep. The clock passed 9 a.m. In her usual well-behaved manner, Nanami was sitting on a floor cushion reading manga. She told Takumi the day before, "I'm going to take a break from school to keep you company, okay?" As if she thought it was the obvious thing for her to do. Their father had already gone to work, so he was not around. Their mother was very busy with phone calls and had yet to prepare breakfast. There was no need for him to go to school that day. Sullen as he was, Takumi opened his sketchbook and began drawing to distract himself. His feelings of rage refused to subside, so he tore up the sketchbook in frustration. As he did that, however... Oh, shit. Nanami sounded puzzled. Takumi had thought she was talking about his picture, but her gaze was actually aimed at the TV. Holy shit. His parents had precognition. They had like a sense something was going to happen. Or maybe Takumi himself, when he said nobody should get to go on the trip, maybe he was the one who somehow created that. Like, he wanted his classmates to not go, so something happened. There was like a accident or something, and like he caused that somehow with his mind. Nanami called out loudly to her mother, who was still busy with phone calls. Now listening, Takumi followed his sister's gaze and stared vacantly at the TV screen. The screen displayed a scene of a collapsed elevated highway. A section that was only about 50 meters long had fallen. Regrettably, a bus driving along there at the time had been caught up in the collapse, toppling onto its side beneath the overpass. It was the very same bus that Takumi should have been on, the bus his classmates were riding on. From just a single glance, Takumi could imagine exactly what had happened. His classmates were on the screen. One child was sobbing, another had blood all over their forehead, and another was lying atop a stretcher being carried into an ambulance. The reporter was announcing the state of the accident with a grave look on their face. But Takumi did not really understand what they were talking about. His mother was standing at the entrance to the room holding a cordless phone. Her face was pale. And he does not care because he wanted his classmates to suffer because he couldn't go on the trip. So either the parents, like they said, this is for your own good, we're not letting you go. So either they had a feeling something like this was going to happen, or he somehow caused this with his mind because he was so angry. Died. For some reason, Takumi was already sure of this. Oh my gosh. Everything happening on the TV was eerily similar to what he pictured in his head the night before, when he had been overwhelmed by frustration and hatred. There was only one feeling that occupied the depths of his mind, a peculiar conviction, one where he was sure that he had precognitive abilities. Long ago, a show on TV that examined people who claimed to have ESP had been etched into Takumi's mind. A person with precognitive abilities had appeared on the show, shocking the world by demonstrating frightening ESP in the experiment. The experiment verified whether or not the psychic could guess which of 12 items were placed in which numbered box. They did this by placing the subject in a different room and proceeding to have them predict which cards with the item name on them belonged to which box. Afterwards, staff members in the other room would place the actual items into boxes, and verify how many the psychic foretold. The person on the show received an incredible 90% correct, causing an uproar among the entertainers. As this happened, Takumi tested if he could predict things the same way the psychic did on TV, only to get every single one correct. Of course, he did not tell anyone else about this. So as he gazed up at the TV, he believed the accident was yet another instance of his precognitive predictions being exactly right. His mother tried hugging him as he lay down, but Takumi avoided her grasp and crawled to the corner of the room. Her eyes swam about as she whispered in a hollow voice. Takumi felt sick. They were useless, he thought to himself. His abilities had not made a single difference. Just thinking about it made his heart turn to ice in an instant. After that, Takumi stopped speaking to others for a while. He quite literally went mute. He did not say a single word to another soul. Okay, when I said this was the moment that his life changed, I wasn't expecting to go in that direction. I just, like, a slight as a child just made him so bitter, but no, it's a little bit more complex than that. His parents worried about him, and their already overprotective habits escalated even further. Finding them to be acting more and more ridiculous, Takumi thus decided to play the role of a mute boy. He thought of it as revenge against them. Damn, like revenge for trying to protect him? Due to his complete lack of talking, his mother took him to be seen in the psychiatric ward of the general hospital. There he was diagnosed with PTSD. Since Takumi did not actually have PTSD or anything of the sort, he never once took his medicine, he merely pretended to. His parents never realized he was acting, and in the end he didn't feel even a hint of pity as they worried themselves sick over. Okay, so as a child, he's always been like, a little off, we will say. So what if he actually did have PTSD and he didn't take his medication, which made things worse? He just told himself, I don't have PTSD. And it's the same thing with him, like having these visions of what he saw, what he might have seen. I don't know. It's kind of up in the air whether he actually saw that scene of the murder. He definitely has some PTSD from it. Everything felt like a lie. The world was filled with falsities. It was overflowing with malice. It was out to get me. Gosh, I'm like, did this now I'm feeling crazy. Like, did this conversation actually happen? It really makes me want to go back and try the positive delusion, but I'm sticking to my guns here. I'm going to stick with it.
私の言っていることが間違っていないってわかるはずです。それと、私が言ったことは全部本心です。これだけは。
It was all genuine. Like, genuine, like she actually cared about him. After bombarding me with her nonsensical theories, Yua had said that one last thing before she'd left. There was no way I could believe her. How the hell was I supposed to believe someone that had been lying to me this entire time? I refused to believe that everything there was me, like Yua had said. Everything she'd said about me being Shogun was a total joke. I wanted to believe that. But when I checked the timestamps in the chat log, there was no mistaking that the conversation wasn't matching up.
僕は無遊病なの?
Sleepwalking, also known as somnambulism or oh gosh, I can't say those words. A behavior disorder in which during sleep, especially non-REM sleep, the subject gets up as if they are conscious, wanders around, eats, bathes, etc., but cannot converse beyond simple topics. Depending on the individual, the state can last from anywhere to a few minutes to half an hour. At the end of the time frame, the individual returns to the place where they were initially sleeping and goes back to sleep. While in this state, the individual is completely unconscious and as such has no memory of their actions once they wake up. This behavior is often occurs in people with mental problems and is often said to be caused unconsciously by stress. Problem was, during the time Shogun appeared to be posting in chat, I hadn't been sleeping at all. If I recalled correctly, I had indeed been at cafe at that time, but I hadn't slept, so I couldn't have been sleepwalking. In that case, I wondered why I didn't have any memories of posting as Shogun. Maybe my body had been being controlled by someone else, which would mean... No, that's ridiculous. I felt that the best way to calm myself down was to escape from reality into the fictional world of ESO. In ESO, everything was fake, a lie. At the end of the day, its world was just part of a video game. But in Baselard, I could become the godlike existence known as Nineheart. A fabrication like that, a lie like that, was something I'd readily accept. I wanted to stay there. Nobody would mind if I did, would they? Or maybe the world of ESO was actually the real world and my own reality was the fake one, just a game. In that case, Nishijo Takumi would be a fictional character and Nineheart would be my true form.
ねえ、ナイトハルト。
I called out to the paladin standing inside the monitor. Was I controlling you, or were you controlling me? Which was it? Could you be real, and I a mere avatar? What if the world I was in was just a game in and of itself? If that were true, that would solve every mystery I was struggling with. What if, just like how I was staring at Neinhard within my monitor, what if someone was staring at me in the exact same way? Whose eyes are those eyes? That would make them the player controlling me. Okay, it's getting a little too meta right now. If I did have someone controlling me, would it kill them to do less of a shit job? Though I guess an avatar couldn't really complain. It would also explain how Shogun and I could be the same person, validating that theory. Come to think of it, it was kind of like what Lieselot, I still don't know how to pronounce that name, Lise, was. Neinhardt and Lise couldn't possibly exist in Baselard at the same time. I was the only one playing as them, after all. Maybe Shogun and Nishijo Takumi were similar and couldn't exist in the world at the same time. It was also possible it was a bug. Speaking of bugs, encountering that bizarre girl in a murder case, as well as a whole bunch of other stuff that had happened, could have been bugs too. The image Shogun had sent to me flashed through my mind. I gripped my head with my hands and frantically shook it away. I wanted to run away from everything. If maybe, just maybe, there was a player controlling me. Please reset me already. Just remake my character and start from scratch, please. The waiting room of the university hospital was filled to the brim with middle-aged people waiting to be examined. The view hadn't changed from a few years prior. It almost made me feel as if time itself had stopped there. Moreover, everyone there looked miserable. The smell of disinfectant pervaded the stagnant air. It was the kind of place that sucked all the life out of you and made you wish for the sweet embrace of death in 5 minutes tops. I didn't like hospitals. The way the lobbies had countless people, yet the corridors beyond felt completely devoid of them, always freaked me out ever since I was a little kid. It almost felt like the corridors themselves absorbed and stewed in the stench of death. I always felt that what was a hospital... I always felt that was what a hospital truly represented beyond its outer facade. I even thought that some horrifying creature was lying in wait deep within the corridors. That was why I really didn't want to go there, but there was something I had to make sure of no matter what, so I found myself reluctantly waiting my turn in line for an examination. Even when I tried to fully immerse myself in ESO, the bombshell that Yua had dropped on me continued to swirl around and around inside my head, and I hadn't been able to concentrate for even a second. As a result, my mind had been torturing me with all the various possibilities all the way until morning, and I'd become genuinely scared that something was wrong with me. That was why I went to the hospital, to get an official stamp of approval from a medical professional that said Nishijo Takumi is completely normal. I wanted to prove it wasn't me who was abnormal, but Yua. I was used to the hospital's psych ward, and yet when the grill at the hospital asked, "Is this your first time?" I nodded without thinking. A girl. Ever since that bus accident, my mother had regularly taken me here for checkups. During middle school, my physician had said that I'd completely recovered, and I stopped going after that. This was my first time coming back in about 4.5 years. Oh, alright. I wasn't expecting one so soon. You know what? I'm actually going to just do the neutral one. I'm just going to try that and see what happens, because I've always been clicking either positive or negative, so I'm just going to have this be baseline. My first physician had been some senile professor who was supposed to have some authority in the field, but I'd only seen him a few times, and after that someone else had taken over, a student of his or something. Although, despite calling himself the other guy's student, he hadn't been particularly young. To be honest, he looked pretty old. Night before, I was reminded of something that Dr. Takashina had said.
ここは病気や怪我だけじゃなくて心にも効く病院なんだよ。
I hated hospitals, but that doctor had been very nice. He'd left a good impression on me, and I thought he was a good person. Well, even then, I'd still thoroughly fooled all the adults to the very end. That is, except Dr. Takashina. He had seen through it all, and he was the only one that declared me completely recovered. Actually, maybe, you know what? Since he's talking positively, I will do a positive one.
あの人に調べてもらえれば。
I wondered what he'd say if he'd learned I'd become an otaku freak. Nah, there was no way that he'd remember me after all this time. It didn't take long for me to be called into the examination room. I'd expected to be waiting there for quite a while, but I guess I was wrong. Why had there been so many people in the lobby then? Maybe they were being paid to sit there just to make it look busy. Or maybe they see him as like a special case, like as soon as he showed up, they're like, oh, we gotta get this guy checked out. It was a different examination room than the one from 4 years ago. But when I stepped inside, I was welcomed with a face I remembered dearly.
Yeah, Nishijo-kun.
Dr. Takashina rose to his feet with a familiar smile, then reached his hand out to me. Realizing he was searching for a handshake, I hurriedly reciprocated.
また君に会えて嬉しいよ。いや、嬉しいというのは変かな。君にしてみれば、またここに来るというのは辛いことなわけだからね。
Despite it being 4 years since we'd last seen each other, he was incredibly friendly. My slight nervousness I'd been struggling with was eased in seconds.
それで、今日はどうしたんだい?
He gestured for me to sit down, so I did. Likely due to all the tension melting away, I told him everything about what had happened to me and what might happen to me in the future. I stumbled over my words many times, probably because I wasn't used to talking so much. But Dr. Takashina didn't rush me. He listened to me intently with a serious look on his face while offering occasional interjections to make sure I knew he was following. Of course, I also told him everything about Yua and the demon girl. I considered that doing so might be dangerous, but right now he was the only person I could rely on.
結論から先に言おうか。
After hearing everything I had to say, Dr. Takashina pondered for a moment, then began to speak.
君は正常だよ。何の問題もない。
本当ですか？
もちろん。
Those were the words I'd wanted to hear more than anything. I dragged myself to the hospital for the sole purpose of hearing them. Is this part of the positive delusion, though, is him hearing this, or is this actually happening? I was scared that he'd tell me there was something wrong with me, and I had no idea what I would have done if he had. But getting checked out by Dr. Takashina had been the right choice after all.
むしろ、おかしいのはその楠木さんという女性だね。西条くんの話だけで判断するのは難しいが、おそらくその女性は精神的な障害を患っているだろう。今後、君に危険を及ぼすような行動に出る可能性がある。すぐに警察に通報しよう。
え？
The police? True, that was probably the safest option. He was right. There had to be something wrong with Yua. She was batshit insane. The thought of her stalking me again sent shivers down my spine.
もちろん、僕も責任を持って君を保護するつもりだ。
Looking at me with a powerful, reassuring gaze, Dr. Takashina clapped his hand on my shoulder encouragingly. He even handed me his business card, complete with his phone number.
何か問題が起きたらいつでも連絡をくれて構わないよ。24時間いつでも君のところに飛んでいくからね。
Damn, I don't know if this is just a delusion. To me, dealing with the healthcare system, this feels like a delusion to have it to be seen so quickly by a doctor and just being like, I will take care of you anytime. Do not hesitate to call. I will provide your services immediately. Maybe it's just this is the positive delusion, or maybe Dr. Takashina, like, he's saying he's normal and fine, but like maybe he knows something's up with him and he just wants to keep a close eye on him. I don't know.
いいんですか？
I feel like I'm going to be saying that a lot. I don't know what's going on.
当たり前だよ。僕は君の主治医なんだから。
I was on the verge of tears. I was truly grateful to be under his care, from the bottom of my heart. Isn't that true? Doctors as good as him are hard to find nowadays. Yeah, trying to find a physician or a doctor? A family doctor? Impossible.
悪魔女のことについても通報した方が良さそうだね。西条くん、君の見たその女がニュージェネの真犯人で間違いないよ。 これはものすごい目撃証言だ。
I'm really curious to see if I just stayed neutral, if there would have been any difference in what he's saying. Dr. Takashina seemed somewhat excited, but you couldn't tell from his tone. As always, he spoke
事
calmly.
件は西条くんのおかげで解決だ。君は渋谷のヒーローだよ。
Yeah, this is definitely a delusion.
僕はこの瞬間に立ち会えて実に光栄に思う。
I still don't understand that whole thing with Yua. I did a negative, delusion, but like, is all that stuff she said, did it actually happen? Because we didn't flash back to him, back in the real world. I was a hero? This wasn't ESO. There was no way someone like me could be a hero. No way in hell. But when I imagined it, my face just about broke into a grin. Middle school girls, high school girls, college girls, MILFs, all of them would be screaming my name and how much they love me. I'd be renowned all over the world as one of the most charismatic people to ever live. Being a TV celebrity sounded cool and all, but I didn't want to appear in front of people, so I'd create a startup company instead. Then I'd become a hugely charismatic boss making the big bucks. I'd be surrounded by a harem of beautiful secretaries serving my every need. And of course, I'd trip all their flags and make them go crazy over me. I'd have a high-rise apartment in Roppongi and hire a bunch of cute maids. It'd be like my own personal maid cafe. Of course, I'd be indulging in the endlessly passionate nightly services. JK, just kidding.
まさに勝ち組。
I abruptly came to my senses, only to find myself sitting. See, this time he came to his senses, but with Yua, that didn't happen. Only to find myself sitting on a sofa in the lobby. Unable to grasp what exactly was going on, I frantically looked around the room. Beside me was a hunched-over old lady. Her eyes were covered in wrinkles, so I couldn't tell whether she was asleep or awake. I took a look at the clock above the reception desk and saw that I'd been waiting in the lobby for a full hour. Had that all been just a dream? I hadn't slept last night, so had I dozed off while waiting? How glorious it would be if that dream was actually real. Talk about disappointing. In the end, I found myself waiting for another 2 hours before my name was finally called. When I entered the examination room, it almost felt like the same events I'd seen in that dream were happening again. Dr. Takashina even appeared almost exactly like he had in the dream. It was probably just that he'd barely changed since the last time I saw him 4 years ago. But this time he didn't rise from his seat, nor did he offer to shake my hand.
今日はどうしました？
And unlike the dream, he didn't seem especially happy to see me again.
西条です。
ん？ああ、これはご丁寧に。高階です。はじめまして。
He bowed his head cheerfully. I was lost for words. It's a pleasure to meet you. That was what he'd just said. He'd completely forgotten me. I shouldn't be surprised. It had been 4 years after all. But I truly believed that Dr. Takashina of all people would remember me. Maybe that was arrogant, but I'd hoped for it all the same. So my heart was overwhelmed with loneliness and emptiness when those expectations were smashed into pieces. Felt like my very existence was being denied. So this would be interesting, like what if I had chosen the negative one instead? Maybe he wouldn't have been so crushed because he had like such positive memories of Dr. Takashina and like positive delusion about how it was going to go. Dr. Takashina started talking to me while making eye contact, but I averted my eyes.
無遊病かどうか調べてほしいと書いてあるが、何かあったのかな？
Right, I'd written that on the questionnaire, but it was all meaningless now. He didn't remember me at all.
別にいいじゃん。先生が覚えてようが覚えてなかろうが関係ないっしょ。最初の目的を忘れちゃダメ。
Oh, right. I hadn't come here to meet Dr. Takashina. I'd come here to prove I was a completely healthy and sane human being. Our reunion was merely a bonus. Who gives a shit if he'd forgotten me? If Saraton hadn't stepped in and given me that advice, I would have come dangerously close to losing sight of myself.
自分でも知らないうちに 外に出かけてて、パソコンで文章打ってて、それを全く覚えてないなんてありえますか？
おお。
知り合いからそう指摘されて混乱しちゃって。
その知り合いの人が冗談を言っているっていう可能性はあると思うかい？
Yua's eyes had been serious. It hadn't looked at all like she was messing with me. At the very least, I had no doubt that Yua believed what she said.
わかりません。
なるほど。ちなみに、その知り合いとはどういう関係だろう？恋人？
はあ、
Where the hell had that come from? And what did it have to do with anything? Was I missing something here?
いや、言い方が悪かったかな。じゃあ言い直そう。その知り合いの人は、君が意識もないまま歩き回っているのを実際に目撃したのかな？
Oh, so that's what he meant. I shook my head.
じゃあ、証拠はないわけだ。
I once again shook my head.
そいつ探偵気取りっていろいろ証拠を突きつけてきて。
そういうことか。ちなみに、これまでにも無遊病の兆候はあったかい？
いえ。
朝目覚めたらいつものベッドじゃなくて違う場所で寝てたっていうことは過去に一度でもあった？
いえ。
じゃあその知り合いに言われたのが初めてっていうことだね。
After nodding weakly, I steeled myself and spoke.
僕、寝てないんです。
もしかして怖いのかな？でもそんなに深刻になる必要はないよ。
いや、その。
That's not what I meant. But I couldn't figure out how to explain it, and it was too late to say it out loud anymore. I was too flustered. After scribbling something on a medical form, Dr. Takashina swiveled away from me in his chair and leaned forward toward the back of the examination room.
葉月くん、ちょっと。
はい。
Oh, oh, made Hazuki wear glasses. Okay, so I had a feeling that that whole thing with the, questionnaire we got at the beginning, right? About, like, do you prefer glasses or no glasses? So I just got an achievement. So the nurse wouldn't have been wearing glasses if I had chosen that. The young nurse rushed over to him, and Dr. Takashina showed her the form. As he did so, he whispered for her to do something, and she quickly withdrew to the back of the room. What had that been about? The doctor turned back toward my puzzled self. Then, in a gentle voice, he began to explain to me how sleepwalking worked. When a person falls asleep, they first begin non-REM sleep before eventually progressing to REM sleep. Non-REM sleep is a deeper sleep where the brain hibernates and brain activity ceases. Meanwhile, REM sleep is a kind of sleep where the body's resting but the brain is active in a state that is fairly close to being awake.
無遊病はノンレム睡眠の時に起きやすいって言われてる。脳が通常の活動をしていないから普通の受け答えとかは成立しにくいけど、ちゃんと返事もするし、階段などを踏み外さずに上り下りすることだってできる。原因としては精神的なストレスを抱えてる時になりやすいんだ。子供に多い症状だけど、成人でもよくある症状なんだよ。これで分かっただろ？深刻になることはないって言った意味が。
はあ。
But I hadn't been sleeping. Even though I hadn't been sleeping, I'd still done things I didn't remember. The time Shogun had been posting from room 37 in the chat room should have been when I was busy playing ESO. Could sleepwalking really be possible there? I wanted to ask him that, but he was already moving to a different topic.
無遊病かどうかを調べる方法としてはいくつかある。一番手っ取り早いのはここのベッドで寝てもらうことだね。ただ特定条件じゃないと発生しない場合もあるかもしれない。例えば自分のベッドじゃないとダメとか、意識がない状態で出歩くにしても目的もなくふらふらと歩き続けるのか、それとも何らかの脅迫観念があって それに影響されて何らかの一連の目的を持って出歩いているのか。それに君の精神状態についても特定の条件下じゃないとダメかもしれない。自宅のベッドの上ならリラックスできるけど、ここじゃリラックスのしようがないわけだ。どうする？とりあえず寝ていってみるかい？
I had nothing to lose, so I didn't see a reason not to try. And after I proved I wasn't sleepwalking, I could try asking the real question I had in mind. The nurse from before, Hazuki-san or something, guided me over to the hospital bed located at the back of the room. As it wasn't a bed meant for sleeping, it was firm and uncomfortable. Then again, considering the sofa I usually slept on, that shouldn't pose any problems for me.
3時間くらいしたら起こしに行きますから。
This nurse was pretty damn cute. As I lied on the bed, I took a quick peek at her face while being careful to avoid eye contact. Her baby face made her look kind of unreliable, and she even had this almost despondent aura about her, but she was doing her job pretty well. She felt like a heroine right out of a classic eroge, one with kinky hospital sex. Hoo-hee-hee.
できるだけ目は離さないようにしていますので、安心して眠ってくださいね。
Basically, if symptoms of sleepwalking occurred, like I started wandering around on my own, she would make sure to take care of me.
それではごゆっくり。
After giving a slight smile, the nurse closed the curtain and left the hospital room. Now surrounded by a pure white curtain, I took a deep breath. All around me, I could hear the voices of doctors examining patients, the sound of nurses running around, and the sound of the door to the examination room opening and closing. I doubted I'd be able to relax here. Could I actually fall asleep like this? I certainly couldn't. I have to sleep in a very specific places. Figuring I had nothing to lose, I closed my eyes. No matter what I did, my mind refused to think of anything other than that corpse that had been massacred and crucified with stakes, as well as the gory pictures Shogun had sent me, right? Like, he talked about how he was misdiagnosed with PTSD and he wasn't taking his medication. This is definitely PTSD he's got. So I forcibly conjured serotonin into my head. Oh boy. I could be bad and... Alright, and like, I could make this a negative one. That'd be kind of fucked up though, so I'm gonna make this a positive one.
私前から思ってたんだけどさ、タッキーって実はすごく強い男の子だよね。
Sarah animatedly moved about in my delusion. Her cute voice chirped for me.
私、そんなタッキーの強さが好き。それに、タッキーは無遊病なんかじゃないよ。私、毎日タッキーのこと見てるもん。だからわかるさ。三次元女になんか騙されちゃダメだぞ。タッキーには私がいるっしょ。またあのコンテナハウスで二人きりで過ごそうね。ボケなす。
Hoo-hee-hee. Seroton, you're so cute, Seroton. She really was my ideal waifu. There wasn't a single woman better than her. 3D? The fuck was that? Ugh, I want to go home already. I want to go home and have Seroton welcome me back with a smile. Wait for me, okay, Seroton? I'll be coming home soon.
帰らなくてもいいよ。
どういうこと？
迎えに来たから。
An incredibly realistic whisper reached my ears. It felt almost like something was poking my cheek. I slowly opened my eyes. Oh, wait, who are you?
おはよ。ボケなす。
Oh, that's her, like, normal form before she turns into Magical Girl. Beside the bed stood Seroton, pre-transformation, Amanogawa Sarah version. And she certainly wasn't at 1/8 scale. She was life-sized and she was moving smoothly. With a gulp, I sat up and reached out to try and poke Seroton's breasts. They were squishy, voluptuous. She's no figure. She's the real deal. Seroton had joined the realm of 3D. He's like, I am no longer interested, you're 3D now.
のんのん。ここは二次元だよ。
Wait, is it? Even I said about how, like, fuck her, she's 3D, and she's like, no, 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 I'm 2D. Even though they're so squishy.
二次元的にプニプニなんさ。
I didn't get what she meant, but as long as they were squishy, it wasn't like anything else mattered. I realized I touched her breast out of sheer surprise, and I rapidly grew embarrassed. A life-sized Seraton was insanely cute, so moe I could die, and most important of all, she was real. Thanks to that, the bashfulness that came from me touching her breasts, and the fear of her potentially hating me for it had become much stronger.
ごめん、セイラタン。
タッキーならいいよ。
本当？
I'm so curious about what the negative one would have been. Maybe it would have been the demon girl would have woken him up instead.
他の人にはこんなことされるのは嫌だけどさ。特に進むとか。あいつに胸触られたら金棒で月までぶっ飛ばしちゃってる。静かに。声出すと看護師さんたちに見つかっちゃうっしょ。
Seraton must have been being mindful of the world outside the curtain. Without making a sound, she then took off her shoes, climbed onto the bed, and then on top of me. Almost saying something out loud again, I hurriedly covered my mouth. Seraton was straddling me. Her bare panties underneath her skirt were pressing against my crotch. This was bad. My Johnson was about to go berserk. Seraton drew her face close to mine. A sweet aroma filtered into my nose. So that was how Seraton smelled.
ねえねえ、タッキー。タッキーも二次元になっちゃうべきだよ。
Well, what's that supposed to mean?
タッキーはまだ三次元なんさ。だから、あたしが二次元にしてあげる。いいっしょ？
Can you really do that?
できるよ。それに、すっごく気持ちいいよ。
I could hear the sound of nurses hurriedly walking about, as well as the voices from doctors examining other patients. We were in a place separated only by a single curtain. If that curtain was open, we'd get found out for sure. That heart-pounding thought combined with the taboo nature of doing something like this in a hospital. I was getting lightheaded. And to think I was committing such obscene acts with my number one waifu. So this is what bliss is. All other thoughts had been pushed out of my mind. So in response to everything Seraton said, I nodded.
そうこなくっちゃ。そんなタッキーが好き。
Then Seraton firmly pressed her lips against mine. She was so soft. Was this the softness of 2D? Was it more soft than the real thing? The sudden, borderline H scene turned my thoughts into pure spaghetti. I had no idea what the hell I should be doing. Then in the face of my bewilderment, Seraton pushed her tongue between my lips, encroaching upon my mouth. It felt so good I started to feel dizzy. To think a kiss would feel this amazing. I wanted her seductive, swirling tongue to violate my mouth forever. My arms were wrapped around her waist. She was very thin since she was 2D and all, flat as a board and yet squishy and voluptuous at the same time. Wasn't this basically the same as kissing paper, though? But it felt so incredibly good that I didn't care. Seraton was terra sexy. Ugh, ugh. I almost want to take my headphones off. I hate wet mouth sounds. Yuck. Seraton sucked in my tongue. It was too much. It felt like I was going to die. I'm just imagining the voice actors having to make those noises. It was starting to get painful now. Seraton's suction was frighteningly strong. I tried pulling my tongue back, but I couldn't. She just sucked it in even more. Yep, I'm taking my headphones off. I hate this. She was pulling on it hard, so hard that it felt like it might rip off. And it wasn't just my tongue. The inside of my throat felt hot. My eyes felt like they were going to pop out of their sockets. I couldn't breathe. My chest hurt. It's like a good delusion turning into a bad delusion. The inside of my stomach churned and churned, turning into a pulpy, sopping mess. I was being sucked in. It's like even in the state he's in, even like his good delusions are affected by like his PTSD or, you know, the bad feelings that he has. Everything inside my body, my organs, my flesh, my bones, they were all being sucked in by Seroton. I guess she's turning him 2D, right? She's like, you don't need organs, silly, when you're 2D. I could feel my pounding heart rising up from my throat, the thick blood vessels tearing off one by one. It was an impossible sensation. It was incomprehensibly painful, and yet it felt even more pleasurable. My entire body had become an erogenous zone. My entire body. Not just the outside, but the inside of my throat, my heart, my blood vessels, my lungs, my intestines. Having Seroton violate the inside of my body, suck it all in and devour it whole, it made me so happy, and that happiness and the sheer ecstasy I was feeling made me feel faint. I'm going to die. Feels so good that I'm going to die. After everything inside my body had been sucked out, Seroton pulled her lips away satisfied. Her mouth was dripping with a mix of blood and drool.
タッキーのすごく美味しかった。
She gave a bewitching smile. I didn't have the energy to respond. She had taken everything I had. It was the first time I'd ever experienced such overwhelming pleasure. I was in a total haze. Fog enshrouded my consciousness and my thoughts were a blur.
ほら、タッキー、自分の体見てみて。タッキーもこれで二次元の住人だよ。
Although I was very unsteady, I tried to get up off the bed and stand up. My body had become thin, just like Seroton's. It was kind of hard to walk around. My body felt limp and I could hardly stand. Fell to my hands and knees, hitting the floor without a sound. Seroton, I can't get up. Give me a hand here. Her voice came from above the bed.
二次元へようこそ。
I sprang up only to find myself on the bed like before. My heart was pounding like crazy. My heart was still inside my chest where it should be. I touched every part of my body. It wasn't paper thin. I was still 3D. I couldn't see Seroton anywhere. As it should be. But was that a good thing or a bad thing? I let out a sigh. That scene was just like the one in the dojin I had bought from Circle Puriporu. In other words, I'd had a delusion using it as a basis. Why hadn't I noticed that in my dream? Well, I knew it was a dream because I hadn't noticed, but I couldn't help thinking that regardless.
西條さん。
A voice called out to me from the other side of the curtain. The curtain quickly opened and the nurse from before, Hazuki-san, popped her head inside the room.
おはようございます。
I bowed my head silently, keeping my eyes low.
結局3時間ぐっすりでしたね。
Huh? Had I really slept for 3 whole hours? I'd been so lost in my dream I'd completely lost all sense of time. And again, I was pretty exhausted.
少しうなされていたみたいですけど、大丈夫？
Naturally, I couldn't mention my borderline wet dream straight to her face. Admitting to my maxed out libido stat would be pretty embarrassing.
でも、無遊病の症状は結局出ませんでしたよ。
Hazuki-san's reassuring voice conveyed that to me.
まあ、今日はたまたま症状が出なかっただけかもしれないから、無遊病でないっていう断定はできないですけど。
No, I really don't think I'm a sleepwalker, so... More importantly, I had to ask the doctor that really important question. I bet she's gonna be like, oh, he's gone for now, sorry. But I couldn't see him anywhere. As I looked around, Hazuki-san handed me a blank form. Not really focusing all that hard, I took it from her and ran my eyes over it. It was a fill-in-the-blank style
そ
form.
れはあなたの心理状態を把握するためのチェックシートです。心理テストのようなものね。それを書いてくれたら今日はもう帰っていいって先生が。
先生は？
ごめんなさい。ずっと診察が続いてて。来週まで様子を見て、まだ改善が見られないようならもう一度来てくださいって。
Then again, it wasn't like he was my primary physician or anything, I supposed. He'd probably just given Hazuki-san a bunch of directions to get me out of here. Well, guess that means there was pretty much no point to me coming to the hospital today. Well, I got a good nap out of it. I really wanted to ask Dr. Takashina about someone that wasn't me controlling me. Whatever it meant, it was a really chilling symptom, so I didn't want to leave without getting an answer. That being said, I didn't have the courage to demand Hazuki-san bring him back to see me, especially when she already looked so apologetic. Reluctantly, I decided to give the test a try. I guess I'd write about my symptoms on the back of the sheet or something. If I did that, I should be able to get another examination scheduled for next week. Now the thing is he going to be honest about it or not?
質問に対してイエスかノーかだけを答える簡単なものですから。当てはまる点があったらイエスにチェックしてくださいね。今後の西條さんの治療に対する参考にしますから、じっくり考えて答えてください。
Hazuki-san went out of her way to explain the procedure thoroughly. The test had some strange questions mixed in, ones you wouldn't normally expect to see in a hospital, or run into at a hospital. It really did seem like some sort of psychological test. Would they really be able to actually learn something from questions like these? Hazuki-san stared at me intently. She showed no signs of leaving. But it wasn't like she had nothing to do or anything. It was more like she was monitoring, no, watching over me or something. My nervousness at being watched made it hard for me to think clearly, but I guess she was just doing her job. Either way, I knew I ought to fill out the test quickly. Oh, I get to do it myself. Okay. Oh, I'm going to save just in case. Okay, when you have business to take care of, you prefer to use emails over phone calls. Yes. Oh. All right. When you have business to take care of, you prefer to use... Now, the thing is, are they asking, like, am I supposed to roleplay as Takumi, what I think he would say? Or is this more like, am I answering as myself? Okay. I think I'm going to do this as Takumi, how I believe he would be. Your ears ring. He definitely do. You have felt someone's gaze and turned around. Yes. You've seen objects that are supposedly stationary move for an instant. Okay, these are definitely geared toward him. Yes, yes. While looking at a digital clock, you've seen the same numbers appear in sequence. You have already cried once this month. I don't think so. You can masturbate using only your imagination. When masturbating, you can visualize uninterrupted imagery. You can daydream without closing your eyes. The frontal view of a car sometimes looks like a face. You have a hard time going to the bathroom after watching a horror movie. You cannot handle haunted houses. Like, some of these I know because he's experienced them before or he's talked about them, but other things I guess I'll just have to, like, I don't know, extrapolate. Cannot handle haunted houses. When you start reading a book, you become so immersed in it you lose track of time. That feels like something he'd do. You believe other planets inhabited by human-like creatures exist. The personality attributed to your astrological sign matches your personality perfectly. You're prone to motion sickness. You believe there is a god. You have a strong ability to sense the supernatural. You've dreamed in color before. You've been in a dream in which you knew you were dreaming. You've experienced memory loss. You have a hard time making eye contact with people. Merely the sight of sour food makes your mouth filled with saliva. You feel like yawning when other people do. Actually, I feel like he wouldn't be affected by that. Don't ask me why. Okay, we're gonna go with that.
はい、お疲れ様でした。
Hazuki-san thanked me as I answered the final question, despite the fact I hadn't said anything. I felt pretty embarrassed at being watched the whole time. My face was probably bright red. Because of that, I avoided looking at Hazuki-san when I handed her the test. There had been no time to write my symptoms on the back, so maybe when I do another playthrough, I'll answer the questions differently.
それでは待合室でお待ちください。お薬が出てますから。
薬?
They were prescribing me something. Dr. Takashina never said anything about that.
ええ、先生の指示で。弱い精神安定剤です。ぐっすり眠れるようになるし、副作用などもありませんよ。
Oh, wow. Thoughtful as ever, Dr. Takashina. And yet, when I realized I'd have to wait in the lobby again, my mood was immediately sent spiraling. Yeah, that would be pretty bad if, like, they just snuck him some medication and didn't tell him what it actually was. By the time I'd gotten back to Shibuya, it was already evening. The hospital was technically in Shibuya Ward, but since Yoyogi was the closest station to it, commuting via train was the fastest. But the Yamanote line had been as crowded as ever. Despite only being 2 stops long, the trip back still made me incredibly tired. Riding the train any farther would have been a pain in the ass, so I decided to get off at Shibuya Station and make my way back to base from there. Even then, there were still tons of people outside the station. I despised crowds. They made my head spin. Not wanting to stay much longer, I tried to speed walk out of the scramble crossing. But even walking straight was nigh impossible. Stumbling even slightly caused people from both behind and in front to bump into me. What's more, a bunch of people handing out pocket tissue packs blocked the way, practically forcing everyone who passed by to take them. Fed up with everything, I ignored the first person handing them out, but took some off the second because at least she was a cute grill. I was so sick and tired of these people handing out tissue packs and shit to push their products. Didn't they have anything better to do than stand right in the middle of the road? Well, whatever, it was free, so might as well take it. Inside the tissue pack I took was a red flyer, and there was a paragraph's worth of shit written on top of it with white ink. Talk about ostentatious, like holy shit. You couldn't exactly miss something with that color scheme. As I walked along, I gave it a quick skim. Type B blood is in short supply. Currently, Shibuya Ward is suffering from a severely short supply of Type B blood. This has only continued to worsen, and we've been struggling to secure the proper quantities of blood for those in need of transfusions. Alright, it was a blood donation flyer. As I read it, I thought back to the form I filled out in the hospital. I bet I'm Type B. I didn't have any memory of filling out something like that 4 years ago. Maybe the way they examined patients had changed recently. Even then, something felt oddly familiar about the test. Deja vu. I'd been getting hit by it all the time recently. Having my mind and body not function the way I wanted them to, the sense of dissonance was an incredibly uncomfortable feeling. So in order to ascertain the true cause behind the deja vu, I tried flipping back through the pages of my memories. I thought back to when Mom had taken me to the hospital about once a week. I'd kept my mouth shut at all times and only expressed myself via nodding or shaking my head. At first, I'd been taken to a perfectly ordinary examination room. But since I showed no signs of improvement, I started going to a different room before long. The room had essentially been a counseling room, which meant it put the patient's relaxation first and foremost. In other words, there were sofas and plushies and whatnot located all throughout the room. Dr. Takashina had taken a very patient approach to treating me, all while refusing to blame my situation on anyone. He alone caught on to how I was merely choosing not to speak, rather than having the inability to do so. Meanwhile, my mom would always talk to me in an unnaturally cheery voice. Every time I'd gone to the hospital, the doctor would always welcome me with a refreshing smile. The nurses also treated me with all the love and care they could, and I had a feeling that there had always been one more person in the room. Oh yeah, the dude in the... Yeah, I didn't notice him before. Wait, now I'm like starting to have second thoughts. When they first showed this CG, was that guy in the background there with the glasses? He definitely stands out. Right, there had been a man in a black suit, one that felt fairly out of place in a hospital. As I'd been doing my best not to speak, I never asked about him. I didn't know who the hell he was the entire time he was there. He didn't feel like a doctor, and he always stood all alone a fair distance away from everyone else, all while gazing out the window. I had dubbed him Mr. Nozoe in my head, though that wasn't his actual name or anything.
Nozomi.
The man in the suit always had a badge on his chest, no matter the situation. And on that badge were the words, Nozomi. It looked like a logo to me, though, so it probably wasn't a name tag. I knew why it was bothering me now. The test from before also had, the Nozomi logo printed on it. I'd a hunch I'd seen it somewhere before, and now I finally remembered exactly where. It was like a huge weight had been lifted off my chest. That aside, what was Nozomi anyway? I was pretty sure it was the name of a business.
のぞみさんっていう美人女社長が設立したカウンターテロ組織とか、へへ、漫画みたいだ。
When I'd arrived at my base, I'd gone straight to look up Nozomi online. However, there were so many results I couldn't manage to pin down anything specific. Let's go with a more normal theory first. That Nozomi guy could have been from the company that made the test. He was just at the hospital in order to sell them or something. The hospital had them adopted the test recently, and they decided to have me fill one out today. I doubted that. I'd never heard of some rando attending a patient's examination like that. So who the hell was that Mr. Nozomi guy? Memories kept pulling at my mind, but I was fed up with it at that point. Either way, the reason behind my deja vu was now clear. I decided I'd ask Dr. Takashina about my memory issues next week, but until then, I was going to stay cooped up in my room without bothering with school. There was no way in hell I'd go to a school where people were trying to hurt me. In all honesty, I really didn't want to screw up the minimum attendance chart I'd so carefully constructed, but it wasn't worth getting myself killed over. I gave up on my Nozoe search and went to look for any interesting-looking threads on @channel. The news boards were almost completely filled with NewGen threads. Even the ESO board had threads like, let's try to replicate NewGen crimes in ESO, and to be honest, I was beyond sick and tired of the whole thing. Diving back into ESO, I found Grim. The @channel news board's super fucking boring recently. They really won't shut the fuck up about NewGen. Well, it is the biggest thing of note recently. Whenever a new incident like this happens, people always freak the fuck out about it. Shitstorm incarnate, lol. Diagnostics. Oh, I didn't see this. Oh shit. Okay. A state of furious, chaotic excitement or activity on an @channel thread. Okay, I got my results. You are moderately delusional, which is the most common diagnosis. You live a relatively comfortable life in the real world, and you are likely able to spend around the same amount of time hanging out with friends as you do enjoying TV, video games, and other media by yourself. Human beings are creatures that require delusions and moderation, for such a thing is the reason why our minds are so enriched. In your case, I'm sure you can enjoy your delusions while still making the best of your real life. Going forward, it'd be important to maintain a good balance between real life and delusions. If you allow your delusions to run too wild, you may find yourself in danger of becoming a freak in no time at all. A word from Isa, I suggest you sing. I'm guessing that's the blue-haired girl, since she was singing. Let song flow from your lips. Singing is an act that exists in reality. However, pouring your thoughts into song is an act born from delusion. Singing allows these two sides to coexist. You can share such a beautiful coalescence with many. That is why you should sing. A word from you. I by no means think it's weird to enjoy anime, but please don't let anime be the only thing you talk about in daily conversations. Hey, this is not... I mean, this was me as my character, not as me. I feel like Takuya is definitely more than just moderately delusional or moderately, whatever they said. They still haven't caught the culprit? I mean, you and I both know the police are incompetent. There's tons of idiots all over Tayweb painting the culprit as some moe hot chick. That demon girl. The desolate eyes of the girl I'd seen at the crucifixion murder scene flashed through my mind, and I felt a shiver run down my spine. As much as I didn't want to remember, that ghastly memory would come back any time I let my guard down. I'd seen the culprit's face. I knew who they were. Should I report it to the police? But I didn't want to get involved. Demon girl. Is there already an offshoot of the perp like that? That might be taking it a bit too far, to be honest. Anyway, these NewGen cases are seriously interesting, dude. I've joined the Free Para NewGen community. You're getting way too into this. Everyone but you and Sisen from our guild has joined. Oh god, was he serious? Now I wouldn't be able to hop on and chat with my guild anymore. NewGen is some weird shit, man. It gives me the chills. I knew you were into gory stuff, Graham, but... Don't tell me you're the type that looks for artistic merit in murder cases. True, the crucifixion corpse could have easily been mistaken for modern art, so it'd be fair to say it was artistic in some sense. The only thing you should be seeking here is how lewd it is. It's like the ultimate form of BDSM. This guy's hopeless. I'd better do something quick. You'll get it once you leave behind your virginhood, Neinhardtan. You lowly bastard. Are you saying you're not a virgin? You damn traitor, Ors. Back on topic, the site pooling all the info together is filled to the brim, so you really ought to take a look. Okay, let me see the tips. Ors. I actually don't know what that is. An ideograph depicting a person on all fours depressed. O is the head, R is the arms and torso, and Z is the legs. Typically used to express despair, dejection, or frustration. There's no set way to pronounce it, and such people may pronounce it as orts, ors, or ors. I really didn't want to look. I wanted to escape the reality in which I'd witnessed the scene of the crime. That's why I'd been intently avoiding all info related to NewGen ever since. I wanted to fool myself into believing the gruesome scene I'd seen had only been a delusion, but I was basically a god in ESO. Not someone strong, but someone who knew it all. Not to mention I was the guild leader. It'd be beyond embarrassing if the organizer of the group couldn't keep up with the latest topics. I had to make sure that didn't happen. I clicked the link to the site Grimm had sent me. The top of the site had the title All Things NewGen written in big letters right in the center of the page. This type of website was basically like a wiki. It was open to the public and anyone could enter info related to a particular topic. Wiki, an online system for the creation and compilation of hypertext documents on a web server. In the case of this NewGen site, loads of people entered info concerning NewGen, and the site updated as they did. Sites like it tended to suffer from unreliable info being mixed in, as well as its fair share of vandalism from trolls, but they could still be pretty useful for getting a quick overview of an incident. Many links were pasted all over the page. I promptly clicked on the link that read Current Timeline. My heart raced. Just reading the site was making me nervous. My palms were slick with sweat. The first incident, dubbed the group dive, was the suicide of 5 high schoolers that had jumped to their deaths. It had happened in the dead of night on September 7th, which was about a month ago at this point. The building they jumped off of was Cornelius Tower, which was located in Shibuya. They dove off the rooftop helipad. Of course, all 5 had died instantly. According to the autopsies, the 5 had foreign pieces of flesh under their fingernails, along with various scratch marks on their hands. Based on that, it was surmised that the 5 had been holding hands as they jumped for one reason or another. There was no suicide note of any form on the rooftop. A person online, one of those people acting like Snake, had actually gone to Cornelius Tower themselves and reported the door to the roof had a sign on it saying, "No entry to unauthorized personnel," and that it was locked practically 24/7. Snake, the name of the protagonist of a certain video game who is a professional in covert operations, is often referenced on the internet when an ordinary person is conducting anonymous or secret investigations. For example, during an operation, one of these individuals might say, "This is Snake. I've infiltrated the building." Naturally, the door had been locked at the time of the incident, and the key was not found among the belongings of the deceased. Essentially, the rooftop helipad had effectively been a locked room. Oh no, I'm dealing with locked rooms again. I can't escape them. And the method the 5 had used to enter was completely unknown. There was a very high chance someone other than the 5 had been present at the scene of the incident. The second incident, dubbed the man-child murder case, had occurred 12 days after the first incident, placing it on September 19th. Early in the morning, a university student on their way home from a karaoke session had discovered a collapsed man covered in blood by the Shibuya Station underpass. The victim had been a university student residing in Shibuya Ward, a 21-year-old named Konoe Chizuo. He was already dead when he was discovered, but his abdomen had an unnatural, very large swelling. According to the autopsy, someone had performed an abdominal incision on the man, stuffed a newly born fetus inside the man's stomach, and stitched it back up. Moreover, a DNA test confirmed the fetus had no blood relation to the victim. The victim was a bachelor and had no relations with any woman. It was only online speculation, but it was assumed that the 32-week-old fetus had been removed from its mother's body via C-section. However, the mother's identity, current whereabouts, and even whether or not she was alive was completely unknown. It was possible the police had already discovered her whereabouts, but if they had, nothing had been publicly revealed. I averted my eyes from the monitor to keep myself from throwing up. Jesus Christ, talk about nauseating. The culprit was completely insane, and maybe, just maybe, these ghastly murders had been carried out by that girl. Japan is over. I stared at Serotan in an attempt to bleach my eyes, and with that, I somehow managed to stabilize my mental state. I considered taking the meds the doctor had given me, but Serotan did the job nonetheless. Anyway, while that might have been necessary to maintain Nineheart's honor, reading all that gory stuff really fucking sucked.
そんなに辛いならさ、読まなくていいって。タッキーがド M ってんなら別に止めないけど、辛そうなタッキーは見てられないさ。もうやめよう。楽しいことだけしてようよ。いつもみたく私にハーハーしてもいいからさ。
Oh, how wonderful and caring you are, Serotan. Serotan was the only one who'd stay by my side. I couldn't ask for a better waifu. I rested my chin on my hands above the table, watching Seraton smile as I took deep breaths. My soul had been healed. I might be able to get through a little more if I kept glancing at her as I read, and so I decided to put that into practice right away. Come to think of it, why had those two unrelated cases both been slapped with the NewGen label? Apparently the group dive had initially been treated as a group suicide, but after the man-child incident had occurred, people online reinvestigated it and discovered the unnatural circumstances surrounding the scene of the crime. Rumors then began to appear saying the five may have actually been killed, and that the suicide label was merely a cover-up. According to the parents and good friends of the five victims, there was no way it could have been suicide. And the mass media had started making connections between the two incidents, starting with where they occurred, Shibuya. Madness explodes in today's youth, the new generation madness. Sensationalist headlines like that had started popping up everywhere, to my understanding anyway. Then came the third case, the murder case I'd witnessed, dubbed the crucifixion. The site didn't have as much info on this case, likely due to it having only occurred recently. The victim, 56-year-old Ota Hisashi, was a university professor who had been crucified with stakes to the concrete wall of a vacant house. That was all that had been publicly revealed. Many of the neighboring residents had claimed that for over an hour after the time the crime was thought to have occurred, around 8 p.m., they could hear the sounds of nails being hammered into something. Even I had heard the sound. I could hear it even now. A horrible, terrifying sound. On a related note, no connection between the third case and the group dive or the man-child had been discovered yet. But with it being the third abnormal incident to happen in quick succession in Shibuya, the crucifixion was naturally treated as another NewGen incident. The police and mass media believed all the crimes had different culprits, but the predominant opinion online, or rather, what most of the net hoped was going on, was that the crimes either shared a single culprit or an organized group of culprits. There also were many occult-based theories whispered about online, such as that everything had begun with the earthquake from 2 months ago. 2 months ago, an earthquake with a seismic intensity of 3 occurred, with Shibuya as its epicenter. Although the scale was fairly minor, there were still 8 fatalities, which became a popular topic of discussion. Come to think of it, it was true that the NewGen cases had begun after that earthquake. Because of that, the NewGen occultists argued that the 8 deaths and the earthquake should be counted as the first NewGen incident, causing a dispute between them and the NewGen mainstreamers. Regardless, the entire situation was abnormal. After all, despite the facts 3 brutal cases had occurred in quick succession, no clues on any of their culprits had been found, and many online were waiting eagerly for a 4th case. If it wasn't directly connected to it all, I probably would have joined in on the chaos myself, posted in a few threads, made a few theories. I could have been waiting excitedly for the 4th incident at this very moment. Damn it, all these assholes were just having the time of their lives, weren't they?
犯人を早く捕まえてくれよ。
A week had passed since the crucifixion, but neither the demon girl nor the police had made any moves. If they knew I'd been at the scene of the crime, they would definitely come and question me about it. But there hadn't been any signs of that actually happening. Thank God, it looks like I wasn't going to get dragged into this after all.
あなたには予知能力がありますか？
That claim you had thrusted at me flashed into my
予知
mind.
能力があるって思わなきゃ納得できないような画像データをあなたが持っていたから。
Even though I'd finally started to relax, that feeling of despair came flying right back in an instant. The image sent by Shogun. The data was still on my PC. Yua's claims were no more than delusions that she dreamt up. Her deductions were a total stretch, not to mention logically bankrupt. Well, I might have ended up not asking about it in the hospital today. The idea of me doing things without remembering them was completely absurd, utterly impossible. I mean, nothing like that had ever happened to me before. So the gory image was obviously faked.
だったらさ、合成だって証拠を見つけちゃえばいいさ。あの画像解析しちゃおうよ。
But it's so disgusting. I really don't want to look at it any more than I already have.
あの女を論破しちゃえば、タッキーはもう怯えることなく平穏な生活に戻れるんだよ。やるしかないっしょ。
Of course, she was exactly right. Yua had talked to me as if I were the culprit behind the crucifixion, but that wasn't true at all. I mean, I had seen the culprit's face. As if I'd let Yua put the blame on me after that. So with a gulp, I double-clicked on the folder where the images were cached. Well, this episode we certainly learned a lot of new information. The big thing is Yua is not who she appeared to be, at least according to what we are seeing from our protagonist's point of view. We could be dealing, obviously, with him having delusions and stuff. We could be dealing with an unreliable narrator here. But, like I said, unlike the previous delusions where he snaps back to his reality after he has the delusions because I chose the negative delusion when he was with Yua, that didn't happen. So am I to believe that everything she said was actually true? Like she actually was just pretending to want to get close to him when she actually wanted to know more about the NewGen murders? And even during the delusion, like he said himself, that there were times where she kind of snapped back to like the nice version of Yua, where she sounded like the girl that he first met before she was cold again. Maybe if Yua is investigating the NewGen murders, I'm wondering if like maybe one of those girls that jumped during the first incident, the suicide, maybe that was someone she knew, maybe a sister, maybe a friend, and she's like invested in finding the culprit. But there's still so many questions. And also the big thing about him possibly having precognition, that was a pretty big revelation as well. So quite a bit of new information in this, but I feel like I'm just going to be confused throughout this whole game until, like maybe we will get the final like, oh, this is what's actually happening. But it's definitely this episode is giving Higurashi vibes a lot, with like a sweet character who all of a sudden it may not be who we thought she was, but is she actually? The whole like, I don't know what's going on. It's giving that same kind of like, I'm not sure what's going on. Is my character just delusional, like with Keiichi? It's like what's real, what's not, and I love that. It's been a while since I feel like I've played a visual novel like that, where I'm just not even sure what my own character is experiencing and what's real and what isn't, like Higurashi Umineko. So I like that for sure. So that's gonna do it for me, guys. Hope you enjoyed this episode, and stay tuned next week for part 4. Until then, bye. Shoutouts to my top tier patrons: Salieri, Revealing Storm, Amlife, Icognito, Saturn Sins, Doubless 91, Harry Gazip, Kenju Storm, and Lynn's VA.